Hello there, Michelle Dewberry till 7. Rupert Lowe, Barry Gardner, both MPs alongside me. This conversation about children stabbing each other really has got you talking. One of my viewers, Bruce, to credit you, you say bring back compulsory stop and search and roll it out, expand it. You're suggesting that might be the answer. Steve, on your say, you say, Michelle, we should bring back corporal punishment for these kids. What would you think to that?
I think that's a bit extreme, Michelle. The parents, as I say, need to take more care of the children.
So it's a no to corporal punishment, Steve. What about you, Barry? Would you
no,
be
I'm not in favour of corporal punishment.
Bit of a caning, bit of a...
I think there is an argument for corporal punishment generally now for the most extreme crimes, but not for children.
I think, Steve, and I'm going to try and get into your mind a little bit, because you don't say this, I'm just expanding. I think what you mean is that, and I think where you're going with this, there seems to be this total lack of respect now, doesn't there? And I would say it's not actually just towards teachers. It's towards people in power more generally, the way people speak to police officers. But then again, we have people in public life supporting and endorsing organisations that have ACAB as some of their slogans. I'll leave you to Google that at your own time and make your hair curl, ladies and gents. Who's this guy? Lucia, you say, Michelle, we should have metal detectors at school gates. If it saved just one child's life, it would have been worth it. The only thing I'd say, Lucia, can you imagine the start of a school day? You've got all these kids piling into a school. They're going to be bleeping left, right and centre because they'll have the backpacks or whatever stuff in their pockets. Which staff members, how many more staff members would you need to be able to facilitate that? Metal detectors at school, yes or no?
Well, I am a metal detectorist.
I know,
as I said, I've actually found an Edward the Fourth second reign half angel on my farm, as well as a lot of Roman coins and other things. So I love metal detecting.
But for schools
But I think in this case, probably not a metal detector. But if you want to put them through an airport scanner or something, then that would be different. But I think a metal detector, a scanner you could go through, a metal detector, sort of shaking a metal detector over people would be quite tricky.
Barry?
There was a school close to my constituency, not in it, but that had one of those airport-style gates that kids had to go through. It was effective. Look, when a parent puts their children into a particular school, they need to know that their child is going to be safe,
of course,
when they're on those premises. And so I think anything that we can do to make those parents confident that that's the case, and to give the confidence to the children, because many of them say, actually, I only carry a knife because I'm afraid I might get attacked by somebody else carrying a knife. Now, if that child knows that nobody else is going to be able to carry a knife because they're going through that metal detector as well, then maybe it will deter them from carrying it and the whole thing can be de-escalated.
You have to go through a metal detector to get into Parliament if you're
You do indeed.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Or indeed to go up the Gherkin, or indeed to go to up a lot of these very tall buildings.
Logistically, I think it would be a nightmare. I think it would be a nightmare for teachers and schools to have to operate. But somehow we've got to give those children security, the knowledge that nobody is going to be able to attack them with a knife or a gun on those premises.
Yeah, the problem is that many of you, if you've got kids, many will be shouting at the screen saying, the problem is, Michelle, many people carry knives now and they'll be shouting, it's for self-defence because so many other kids have got it. So it's all well and good, Michelle, I don't take my knife. And what happens then when someone comes at me with one? The whole thing is an absolute mess. If you've got solutions, tell me, please, what they are. But look, we've heard of Partygate, we've heard of Beergate. Now, I mean, I'm not making this up, ladies and gents, we've got Voice Coach Gate. This all boils down to, it was basically exposed at the weekend on Sunday in the Times. There was a serialisation of a book, and in this book, it's basically explaining that Keir Starmer used this voice coach actress lady to help him prepare to respond to something that Boris Johnson was about to say. Long story short, this was when we had substantial lockdown restrictions. Keir Starmer, Barry, was one of the people, A, calling for said national lockdowns, and B, at the front of the queue, chastising people when it came out that they hadn't been potentially following the rules. Should he go?
Well, I think he followed the rules. I mean, the point is, it was a work meeting, it was about work, and it was presumably, I understand that they were masked and it was socially distanced. So,
is a voice coach an essential worker? Could you not do your voice coaching over Zoom?
Actually, Zoom would often distort it depending on the quality of your Zoom connection. But actually,
is it an essential worker? That's my point. An essential worker was supposed to be the people that worked in the most essential tasks. You perfecting your voice in order to rebut Boris Johnson, is that an essential task during COVID severe lockdown? My
understanding is that it was classified as a work meeting with something that was needed for his work.
No, I know how it was clarified, but Barry, we all know at the end of the day, you had a situation in life that was egged on by the likes of Keir Starmer, where people were not allowed to be with their dying relatives. They were separated at funerals and all the rest of it. And they followed rules. And
Michelle, I think there's a big difference between somebody having a socially distanced work meeting and what Boris Johnson was doing in number 10 Downing Street, smuggling in booze and holding parties.
Yeah.
There's a big difference between those two.
Come on, Barry. This is a classic case of do as I say, not as I do, isn't it?
No, I don't think it is.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Keir Starmer, not only was he keen on stronger lockdowns, he also didn't want to end the lockdown when it was ended. So he was a complete lockdown merchant. To have voice coaching, I'm sorry, that is not an essential issue. And I think this is a disgrace, frankly. And how he squares that circle, I don't know. I personally think, looking at him, he's probably further left-wing than Jeremy Corbyn. I think he's probably the most duplicitous Prime Minister since Tony Blair. And frankly, this just sums him up. So how you can defend the indefensible, I really don't know, Barry.
Look, there's two things I think I would say. One is that it wasn't simply about essential worker, OK? Because if you were at work and you were working in a socially distanced way, it was perfectly legitimate. MPs' staff were able to come into Parliament and work from Parliament. This is the case of a politician's staff coming into Parliament doing work. But
the optics were terrible.
My point to you would be this. Did it actually make any difference?
The optics were terrible.
I don't know that it did. I mean, was he any better at presenting afterwards than he was before?
But that's not the point. The point is,
I think he should ask for his money back.
The point is, he broke the rules that other people would not have been able to follow.
I don't think he did.
Other people could not have justified going or indeed having a voice coach coming to their house or going to visit a voice coach. They would not have been allowed to do that.
I think if your job is public presentation, which as leader of the opposition it is, then actually that is an essential part.
I'd call it a refinement on his ability to deliver a pretty irrelevant message.
Well, that's a very refined definition.
I just want to be clear, in Tier 4, the restrictions say that everyone must work from home unless they are unable to do so. Of course, Keir Starmer hasn't come out and verified any of this, but the rumour is that actually this person was contracted as early as 2017. So if you've got a voice coach working with you for years, I would personally dispute the essential nature of that. And the thing is, Barry, people will find this so offensive because they themselves, I know my life, I was hospitalised for a month. I wasn't allowed a single solitary visitor in hospital for that month.
Absolutely.
Because people, including Keir Starmer, was making out that if we saw anyone, we'd be practically killing each other and so on and so forth. So most people followed those rules, having been terrified by the likes of Keir Starmer. So to find out that actually people were bending and stretching and cajoling rules to accommodate so-called work meetings, it's so offensive to people.
Yeah, Michelle, look, I think you go to the nub of what is often the issue, and that is don't do as I do, don't do as I say, do as I do.
Yeah.
And this sense that there's one rule for them and another rule for us. And that, of course, is wrong. I think it's for, Keir Starmer, obviously, to explain why it was felt that this was right. My view is it's a work meeting. If it'd been going on for, 2 years beforehand in any event, that shows that it was a consistent pattern of his work programme. So I would give him the benefit of doubt. You wouldn't, but I think the essential point that you make goes much wider than voice coaches and VoiceGate and anything else.
But Barry, this is about the state. This was about the state shutting
make
people
an
down.
Exception for themselves.
The state who's supposed to serve the people used COVID as a lever to strengthen its hold over people. And that I'm not jabbed. I would never have had that jab, and I found it very difficult not to have it. I had to not travel. I had to do all sorts of things in order to avoid having to have it, which, again, I personally think it's an absolute outrage that any government can force any citizen to have an experimental jab, which is what it was. And now we have lots of complaints about illnesses and damage from indeed I had an MHRA debate the other day. MHRA supposed to be independent, they're not. They're largely funded by the pharmaceutical industry. So I'm sorry, there's lots of things that were wrong about COVID. Had Starmer been against further lockdowns, maybe he had an argument. He was pro longer and stricter lockdowns. You know that.
Obviously, I've got to mention, by the way, just to do my legal bit, that some of those pharmaceutical companies are not here, and I'm sure that they would dispute some of the points just being made.
Well, I don't think they can.
No, but I do have to carry on, Barry.
Yeah, look, my family had the same experience as you, Michelle, in lockdown. Only my wife could go and visit her 90 and 91-year-old parents, all during that time. The rest of the family were debarred. It was a very difficult time for many, many people. Rupert and I disagree over the value of those inoculations. I believe that they did save many lives. You believe that actually they didn't. We'll not agree on that. I don't think Boris Johnson thought it was a cold. I don't think he thought it was a cold when he had to go into hospital for those weeks during it. He had thought it was just, you remember at the beginning he said, just let it rip. And then he got it himself and he came out and he then took the lockdown seriously.
To be fair, Boris was in the vulnerable category, as you know, because he was overweight. And he suffered. And it was a man-made virus.
Many people in this country are overweight. Many people have diminished ability to cope with infection. And so I think if we're a society that wants to protect the vulnerable, then we should actually all chip in.
You don't need to lock people down to do that, Barry. They need to isolate themselves. Those people who had a concern could isolate themselves.
I think it saved many lives.
I said that from day one.
Well, I mean, I can tell you that debate rumbles on, and anyone that's watched this show throughout that whole period will know that I myself have very strong opinions on it, but I'll spare you them.
I didn't know that.
I had my strong opinions. Well, Keir Starmer was asked about the situation today. Take a listen.
Of course not.
Well, there you go. That was him talking. It was at a NATO conference. And it reminds me, do you remember we used to have Boris Johnson? He was at very important international conferences. And people would be shouting out, asking him about pieces of cake. So you've got to be careful what you actually try and create when you're in opposition, because it will actually return and visit itself on you. Some people getting in touch about that fair story at the top of the show saying, Michelle, what you should do is jail parents and punish parents if their children go out committing murder and crime. What about that?
Well, I made the point that I think the parents have to accept responsibility. But in order to do that, we have to help parents to be good parents. And the problem is our progressive society has undermined the role of the family, and we have to reverse that, Michelle.
Would you agree with parents being criminally punished for the acts of the child?
No, I don't think they should be criminally punished for the children's acts, but there is something called negligence. And if you're a negligent parent, and if it amounts to criminal negligence, and you can envisage a case where a parent knows that their child is unnaturally violent, because in some cases they've tried to restrain their children, so they do know, but has not then worked with the authorities to try and make sure that that child is protected from doing anything they shouldn't, then I think those parents are culpable.
Well, there you go. What do you think? Have you got teenage children or teenage grandchildren? Would you like to be on the hook criminally if they don't behave themselves? Have you got control of them? And if not, should it then be you behind bars? Get in touch and tell me. There's lots I need to discuss.